little bit about me. Said I had a degree in agriculture business, which seems like why is a guy from farming coming into manufacturing? I knew the owner of the business, we'll go with that. A lot of what my experience was in school was dealing with food manufacturing, which is identical to manufacturing metals. It's a lot of similar concepts as I came to find out. A little bit about Sapphire metal finishing. We're gonna go in the history a bit and just our journey to ISO. And so we're over in Caldwell, Idaho, and right next to Boise. It was founded in 2017, so I started not long after they began. And the owner of the company, he gave his reason why he started the company. He said, I had the privilege of working as the president of Recluse Motorsports. During this time, I had occasion to be frustrated with our anodizing partners. A Recluse distributor in Great Britain pointed out that we were losing sales because the finished components of one of our most basic products, a clutch, were wildly inconsistent in color. At the same time, long anodizing lead times negatively impacted our ability to ship to our customers on time and tied up cash because we had to maintain 5 times more inventory in finished goods. As I analyzed the inconsistency we were experiencing with the anodizing industry, I began to feel that improvements could be made. After careful consideration and planning, I decided to leverage my education, skills, and work experience to start an anodizing company. In a lot of ways, he basically just got mad enough to start his own company. A little bit about ISO 9001. Andrew did a really good job talking about NADCAP, the requirements. ISO is it's really similar. Not quite as intense as NADCAP. And essentially what you have to do is you say what you do and you do what you say in your procedures. If you say you're doing something, you better be doing it. It's to help you keep a consistent process, have continuous improvement, and deal with your quality management. Getting to ISO 9001, I warned my quality manager, I was gonna put a picture of her, couldn't resist it. I was like, you're gonna be here, at least in spirit. In March 2021, the boss, Dwayne, asked me to get started on it. He's like, here's the spec, here's what you need to do, figure it out. And I had 0 experience in it, so we decided we should hire someone who actually had some experience. We hired a quality manager, and she had done certifications before, and so she was able to kind of get our ball rolling. We also went to some AS 9100 training, which is also similar. Big part for me with that one was learning internal audits, because you got to do those internal audits. The next phase of us getting to ISO, we started looking for an ERP, because we were on paper, and I'll show what our previous paper system was a little later. We knew we could get ISO with paper, but it was going to be much more difficult. In 2023, we still hadn't gotten an ERP online, but my boss was getting real tired of the dragging the feet. We just weren't quite getting there. And he's like, just with paper, go. Just make it happen. Because as stated before, with ISO 9001 or any kind of certification, there's customers that will come to you whether they need it or not, but because they like that certification. So in August 2023, we had our first internal audit. And then October 2023, it was decided to kick the old ERP system out because we still hadn't had it up and running after a year and a half. And we found Steelhead, brought it online by February. And then in April 2024, we decided we had our second internal audit before our actual ISO audit. And that basically just taught us, hey, we're ready, we've got everything covered, and Steelhead's covering all these things. And then in July of 2024, so just recently, we passed our audit and we're now ISO. So the things that made that audit easy, that Steelhead helped us with. We had the work in progress tracking, maintenance and sensor dashboards, quality management, easy to record and recall customer requirements, able to refer to uploaded files, and incorrect routing is very difficult with Steelhead. So with our whip tracking, for those that, you're on Steelhead, so you know what this looks like. This is just a little blurb of a work order. You can see where these parts are, how many are there. These are all things that this auditor just was blown away by. She had never seen a system quite like Steelhead where you could just see everything at the touch of a button. And here we see it, just the same thing. This is all the part transfers. We can tell you where that part went, who touched it, how long it was there, and that really showed the control that we had. So maintenance and sensor dashboards, for this is a little blurb that our auditor, she actually mentioned maintenance isn't part of ISO. You don't have to have it, it's not part of the spec. But because we put it in our procedures and everything like that, we had to have it. With this one, we had to show that we controlled our tanks, and just like with Andrew, it's identical thing. You can see on this day, all of our measurements, and that we're in spec. Quality management. With this one, we didn't have any parts on hold when I took this picture. We had an NCR currently in process, but the parts on hold really saved us a lot with our audit, because we have our little cage here to segregate anything that's non-conforming or waiting for disposition, or just a defect that we're not sure we need to be asking someone, and it can't be just immediately asked. We've got our cage here physically, but digitally, because we were able to just separate it, no one could move it until a quality hold is removed. It really showed that auditor that we were very quality focused, and we were going to control that product. And then with our NCRs as well, we can see here's these two parts that we're reworking, and that's where they are. And then customer requirements was a big one. We'd always struggled in our old system to record customer-specific information. Sometimes it's PO specific. In this case, this is actually the customer page for one of our customers. And most of our customers, and you probably have examples of your own, they don't give you the information, or they're like, we want this blue, but only you know what that blue looks like, from previous instances. So we found that in Steelhead, we found this place with a conversation where we can put all that data. This is all the weird stuff about that customer. When they ask for this is what that means. And then when we pulled up a sales order, the fact that on the floor, we could pull up the original purchase order from the customer. She loved that fact, because if there was any question about it, then it could be checked on the spot. The next one was that all the data is available, that we could repeat things. We could do the same way every time. So here we see, I got a couple of these images of our work boards. We got a part, we can see what it looks like. I mean, unless we've got a requirement that we can't take pictures of it, then of course we won't. But we can see what the racking department, what rack they put it on, and the name of the rack. That way, next time, we don't have to retrain an operator, and they can do it the same way every time. Same way with this one. This customer didn't want me to put a lot of information, but it was the best image I could find. We got a picture of the part plugged, and it was hard to do it, but there was actually 3 other pictures of this part that we had that you could scroll through to make sure all sides were masked correctly. It only happened the one time, because once everyone figured out that, wait, they can see this, they know for sure who messed up, they paid a little more attention to what they were doing. Then the other thing, we call it receiving double check, but contract review. So we added that after our receiving because of the complexity of our process. There's just so many different ways you can go. There's a bunch of opt-ins and opt-outs that can be with our process. We realized that we needed a second pair of eyes. Not the most efficient, we know that, but we just found that having that second pair of eyes looking over that PO and the process, especially for new parts, was necessary, which was great, because there's only about 5 people in my plant right now that are authorized to press that button, yes or no. And they've been trained, they know the process well enough to go through, okay, yep, this is ready to go. All right, I jump back to here. I should have brought my tablet up here. As an example of what I did for most of the audit, was I walked around the auditor, literally just with my tablet for about an hour, and just, you want to look at that? It was great, because she ran out of things to do. She actually went home early.
Did you pay less?
No. No. Like, we were literally in our conference room, because that was the thing. We actually went around the plant for part of the audit, and they were pretty much in our conference room the whole time just pulling up data. It was an incredibly fast process. Part of it was because our documentation is also digital, so it's easy to recall. But she was just like, show this to me, and we're just sitting there on Steelhead just showing her over and over again, just whatever part you want to look at. But I kind of wanted to show you this slide again. It was kind of a slow burn, and then all at once. Basically with Steelhead, and I'm going to talk about a little after, that Steelhead's not everything. There's other things you need to have to be ISO 9001. But when we got onto Steelhead, there was just a lot of confidence in the company that we were going to pass. The quality manager and myself were like, we're going to pass. There's probably going to be some findings. We're pretty sure about that. But once we got Steelhead online, it was also on the plant floor that they were also sure that we were going to pass. My chemist actually, he saw me preparing for this, and he's like, I didn't think we were going to pass at all until we got Steelhead. So some of the things that we did besides Steelhead. So Steelhead's great, but I didn't want you guys to think if you're on Steelhead that you're ISO compliant. There's quite a few things, and Andrew already covered quite a few of them. Management review meetings. ISO requires that. You've got to have these meetings. You've got to have some kind of system for continuous improvement, and some of that is your quality management. You just got to make sure you have that documented. You've got to have your internal audits. You've got to have document control, like your procedures, your trainings, and other documents. Supplier quality management. How are you rating your suppliers? You've got all your suppliers in, but you got to have your procedure of how do you qualify them. Customer satisfaction surveys, and then your physical organization of your plant. So one of the reasons why there was such I'm going to back up to there. There was such a gap besides the ERP between when we hired our quality manager and when we're like, okay, we're going for ISO 9000, is we had to kind of organize the plant better. There's the digital space and the physical space. We weren't very organized in the physical space. And so we did a bunch of 5S, a bunch of different things to kind of clean it up, to make it a lot more streamlined, and which also made it easier to bring on to Steelhead.
I'm not familiar with 9001 at all. Thank you. It looks like it's a lot of kind of inputs, right? They're looking at some things and checking the box. Mm-hmm. Like, do they measure for like actual results? Like, could you check the box on all that stuff and show them Steelhead, but still kind of consistently hit 70% on-time delivery and
yes,
super high rework? And
yes, so a lot of it is not in the spec, and I'm sure there's those who may correct me. A lot of it is what you put in your procedures. So if you say that this is what we will hit, if you're not hitting it, they may be like, what? Why aren't you hitting this? Like, they're not going to do a major finding. They just made, from the words of our auditor and our quality manager, is whatever you put in your procedure, they'll find a reason to ding you if you're not doing it. But they may not disqualify you.
For ISO 9001 as well, but one of the questions as we've looked at implementing, like Steelhead and other even cloud-based tools, is document control. Is there any requirements that you came across for the software specifically that you have to document?
Not really. We actually have two different systems. Mainly, we haven't committed to one or the other. So we have a server system just for kind of internal management stuff, and then we have another system that our quality was putting all theirs in a separate area. Not exactly the most efficient way to do things, but where all of our procedures were stored. And the reason there was the first one was because that's how it started in the company. And then the second one was so that we could put it on all the computers, because it was cloud-based, so that all employees could see the procedures if they needed to. But there's no specific ones. It's just you have to come up with a plan.
It's only semi-familiar with the ISO 9001. Can you speak to how you maintain revision control using Steelhead? We've had some trouble in the past with revision control.
On what?
Blueprints from customers. Customers are, their part numbers might be the same, but they're updating revisions, and they might have different specifications for different revisions.
Most of the time for us, it's a different part number. So they'll include the Rev A or Rev B in the part number, and so then we just put it in as a separate part number. That's how we've dealt with it.
Does anybody else have a solution?
You just have to make sure you have a procedure that says, specifically if you're getting a print from a customer and they have a new rev, you have to have a procedure that says, if we get a new rev print, we have to dispose of the previous rev and replace it with the new rev. Then you have to have somebody in the organization that it's their responsibility that they carry out that procedure. And that's essentially meets the requirement of it. That's how we do it.
Well, it's always seemed pretty simple to me to have Steelhead put a rev and then a blank spot, so you can just have part number, rev, just within the part card. That way you wouldn't have to invent a new part number every time you have a new revision, like you're suggesting. You know what I mean?
Make sure you run the latest, but then have the traceability to see what all the past revisions were.
Yeah, basically a new revision creates a new part card that's somehow linked to the past part cards, but
Yeah, no, it's definitely possible. I'll take a look at that. I agree with what this gentleman just said about the revisions. If we're entering a new part, we're having to do it every time. You kind of lose the genealogy of that part, even go through the revisions.
and then we're having to add a new recipe to it. It's really a whole new part, right? And so, one of the things I had on my list for Steelhead to discuss was how to handle revisions, but also we have customers that don't have part numbers, and they just send us miscellaneous parts. What I'd like to see some logic in Steelhead that if we enter, let's say, the XYZ axis of a part, because we enter the dimensions of the parts in order to do the sizing for how many parts we can fit in the volume of a tank, or material type, or just general information. And if Steelhead sees, hey, there's 7 parameters that equal another part in the database, identical, and it pops up with a query, say, hey, there's another part, it's just a duplicate part. Because what happens is we're entering duplicate parts when it comes to miscellaneous and there's no part number, right? So that's a waste of time. So I like to see some in Steelhead to look for that logic when it sees there's these data parameters, these entry points in the actual work order that matches another part identically to question whether it's a duplicate part. So I think that'd be a great new feature functionality.
You don't think it's better in that case to push back on those customers and require them
That's what I do.
to do
Depends on the customer.
That's like the ABCs 1, 2, 3.
So-
Give me a part number.
Yeah, we have those customers that are just, they're mom and pop shop, they're maybe too deep, right? And they're just trying to get by. So I'm looking at it from their perspective as well.
No part number, no plating.
No, I mean, if it's a big customer, I'm gonna question what the heck are you doing, right? We have customers that have 200-300 employees, they should have something formally in place. But I have customers who work out of their garage, they're making, $500,000 a year out of their garage, okay? So they're not gonna go through that level, and they don't require certs either, these customers. So most of our customers do require certifications, a lot of DoD parts, but we do a lot of mom and pop stuff. But I wanna accommodate them, but I also don't wanna add to my overhead in administrative cost, right? So if I have a solution to that, it'll help them, but I don't then have to put the burden on fixing their problem. Well, it's not really them. I mean, it's a mom and pop shop. I want to help them. I want to help them grow too, but I also don't want to make it a burden on us.
I understand.
Yeah, we've actually had a similar problem with the part number, especially with new customers starting up. We've had to do some pushback. Sometimes they just perpetually stay miscellaneous because it is just random parts after that. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times it's they're prototyping something.
Yeah.
And then they get part numbers after that once they decide which one they like.
We do have a lot of prototypes, you're right.
Yep.
So you had mentioned that you were working with a previous company, a different ERP system, and obviously we're talking about QMS 9001. Did you kind of have to rewrite your QMS once you adapted Steelhead ERP system? I know that these guys are super flexible with what they do and how they do it to try and maybe kind of work within your boundaries of your current QMS system, but just kind of wondering how that got handled.
When I say we worked with a previous ERP system, it was never production. It never ran on its own. That's the reason why we got rid of it. After a year and a half and 3 months of my time being specific to it, our owner just was like, no, this is not working. Found Steelhead. I about wrung his neck after he told me we're pulling the plug. And then within 24 hours, I was like, okay, I'm good with this. But as far as the quality management, so we were still doing paper. And so with Steelhead, all we did was upload our current NCR form with some modifications because some of it gets populated. And then outside of that, our QMS actually just got better because of Steelhead. Yeah, before it was all paper.
Thank you, Josh.